Here's Kaprizov, right up the shoot, snap the shot, rebound, he scores!
Yeah, that's a familiar battle cry. And the question right now is, what is Kirill Kaprizov's current status? He has become a story at a time that a lot of people didn't expect he would. To help us sort of unsort what we know from what is being speculated on, Russo Radio, kind enough to join us. Your story dropped about an hour ago via The Athletic, in which you attempt to try to bring some reporting and some journalism to the story. For those who have been on the outside, not paying any attention, what exactly should we be concerned about? What is the Kaprizov story that has the attention probably in the entire hockey world right now?
I think there's two things to be concerned about. One, and both lead to the same thing, which just shows you that there seems to be some pressure here to try to prevent these guys from coming back, and they're using the military service as sort of the reason. We saw it last week with Fedotov. And what's scary about him is he has been arrested, and he's put in a naval military camp right now for apparently a couple years. And I talked to Philadelphia Flyers GM Chuck Fletcher about that. We can talk about that in a second. But the twofold issue with Kaprizov is, one, they're saying that he is involved in the same situation that this Fedotov kid that was in 2017 when they both played for a team up in Ufa, that they allegedly found a high-ranking military officer that was selling military IDs to the UFA players, and Kaprizov is suspected of buying one of these military IDs. Now, what's weird about that is then his career flourishes. He goes on to play another place, then he's traded to CSKA Moscow. He plays there for 3 years. He's playing for the Red Army team. During that time, he is apparently a student in school, which a lot of Russian athletes do to sort of, push back their military obligations. And what they're saying now is that exemption that he had, the conscription, expired on June 30th. And if that's the case, regardless of this whole other facet of the story, this alleged, fake military ID that they're saying that the reports are saying that Kaprizov bought, the other issue is that technically they're saying his exemption for military service is up and that he's going to have to serve that. So this is the issue they're trying to unpack here. They're trying to find out how credible this stuff is. The reports out of Moscow today and all the Russian outlets said that he had already fled the country to the United States. Now, the Wild are denying that. Bill Guerin says that he is still in Russia, but we've seen it before, obviously, where Kaprizov came to the United States. None of us ever knew for 2 weeks, including Bill Guerin. So maybe, they're just saying this to protect the kid, or maybe he is actually in Russia. That we obviously don't know right now, but it's a very delicate situation. As I mentioned, I was talking to Chuck Fletcher, and he's scared to say anything right now because he doesn't know how things are going to be interpreted in Russia. And what they're hoping to do right now is sort of not say anything, bring any public pressure to this. And their hope is that what happens a lot of times with these Russian kids with their top goalie prospect is that, in a couple of weeks, this will die down. They'll just let him go. He could pay his way out, which happens all the time over there. And they could get themselves out. But right now, there's just nothing that the Flyers can do. And I think the Wild are about to find themselves in the same situation where they're just going to be praying to God that Kaprizov winds up back here in August.
So do we know where Kaprizov is right now?
No, I mean, again, the reports there said that he had already left the country for the United States. Bill Guerin says he's in Russia. That's all I could tell you.
Okay.
But as I've said before, the Wild thought he was in Russia when they were in a holdout situation for him, and he had secretly come here. So who knows if he is here, and they're just trying to, whether Bill doesn't know or not, maybe he is actually here. The other thing is ironically, on July 1st, I did a big story on this situation and how really teams were nervous that their guys that went back to Russia were going to wind up back here, because it is, you show up to the border. It's not like the United States where you could just go up, and if you decide to fly to Europe or Brazil or, Asia, whatever, that you could just show up and leave, and then you land in customs there and you can get in. In Russia, when you leave there, you essentially have a border control at that side of the border as well. So the hope is, the concern is by a lot of NHL GMs is that even guys that have work visas show up there and they're just told, sorry, you're not leaving. And as I reported in that story, Kirill Kaprizov doesn't even have a work visa. So he played last season without it. Kevin Fiala did as well. A lot of guys were unable to get that. And so I wrote the story the other day, and the one thing that Bill Guerin said on the record in that story is that he tried to convince Kaprizov not to leave here. And for the story that I wrote today, a lot of agents, by the way, apparently LaPanta is not listening to the radio right now because he's calling me. Like a lot of agents have told me that have really prominent Russian athletes that they tried to convince their clients not to leave. And then in the story that I wrote today, I quote somebody that is very, very close with Kaprizov and is very, very close with a lot of Russian players. He's essentially a conduit in the United States that helps a lot of these Russian players, from buying homes to getting cars to whatever. And he told me he warned all these guys, do not go home. And the reality is a lot of them just laughed and said, no, we're going home. What are you talking about? And now here, nobody's laughing anymore is the quote in there. And that's the same thing. Like Bill Guerin was telling me 5 months ago that he was going to try to convince Kaprizov not to leave here. But it's hard. I mean, this guy comes here at 25 years old. Remember last year in the pandemic, his family wasn't allowed to come here at all. He didn't see one friend all season. This past season, his parents came once. They came out to Chicago, I think, watched a game, then went to the All-Star game with them. He didn't see his brother all year. His brother's his best friend. Like, I don't behoove the kid for wanting to go home. But what the risk was, especially with Kaprizov, regardless of his whole military situation, is that he was going home and doesn't have a work visa. So when he gets to the border in August, regardless, it's going to be a risk if he can get out. So we'll see. I mean, if he really did flee the country, he could only go 3 ways. I wrote that in the story the other day. There's only 3 ways that essentially somebody could get from the United States right now into Russia, and that's through Croatia, Turkey, or Dubai. And Kaprizov, when he went home to Russia, had to fly through Dubai and actually stayed there, I think, for a week to get his papers in order. So if he did flee, he had to go through one of those ways. But, again, I'm going to take Bill Guerin at his word. In Russia, but we've seen before where Bill Guerin thought he was in Russia and he wasn't. So who knows from that perspective. If he did leave, Dan, I mean, I talked to a couple sources that said that's a good thing, obviously, for the Wild. But he better not go back there. Oh. I know Valerie Bure really well. And Valerie Bure, years ago during the Soviet Union, defected with his brother Pavel Bure. And Val Bure, to my knowledge, has not even been back to Russia since because he's so worried about what would happen if he landed there. And, from Kaprizov's standpoint, if he did effectively defect, now he's got a lot of concern about, when does he go back, if ever? He's got his family there. I mean, this is a delicate situation, and this goes back to, when the whole Russia-Ukraine story happened, and a lot of Wild fans were asking me, like, how come you guys don't ask about Kaprizov about this? How come you don't ask Kaprizov about this? And the reality is that, one, what could the guy say? But two, because anything can be construed poorly back there. And I think none of us wanted to put him in a position that would potentially put his family in peril. And that's the concern now, is that you have this guy that has that they're pressuring with all this military stuff right now, and the obligations that he apparently owes the country. And it's a real concern, I think, inside the Wild now. What happens? Does he have to fulfill that obligation? We'll see. But it's going to be, I think, a nerve-wracking couple months here for the Wild until that guy steps foot in the United States again.
Let me read back to you, for the sake of the audience, a quote from your piece, the same source you describe as close with many Russian players. Ask how concerned he is that Kaprizov could be forced to remain in Russia. A source knowledgeable of the goings-on in Russia said he's not, quote, unless it's coming straight from the top, and you know who I mean. If it's coming from the person, that would be, of course, Putin, and he says Kirill's not going anywhere, then he's not going anywhere. Unless it's coming from that one person, everybody else is going to be okay. Only one person can make him stay, not nobody else. But is it possible? Like a small percentage, of course, because he's one of the biggest names. To make an example, we know Putin has that kind of authority and that kind of power, and that's what makes this potentially such a scary situation until we kind of get it resolved, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, Fedotov, the Flyers prospect, former CSKA Moscow player as well. Kaprizov, former CSKA Moscow player. That is the Red Army team. The owner of the Red Army team is one of the richest human beings in the world. Unbelievable power there, gas company that he owns and everything. People say that the CSKA Moscow owner is like the number 3 most powerful person in Russia after Putin and Medvedev. And so, that's the concern here is that, what is this, did he make a call type thing? I mean, this is the type of thing that a lot of the GMs are really worried about here, and why they're trying to be really super, super sensitive to this whole situation. And here I'm in Montreal right now at the NHL draft. There are 3 Russian players supposed to go in the first round tomorrow. How does this affect them? I mean, are you going to right now? I mean, look what happened. The Wild just had Murat Kuznetsov, who they thought, that was their second round pick, the whole big Cunnin trade a couple of years ago. He is, a guy they thought they were going to sign right away and bring him to North America, right away and put him in Iowa. And what happens to him? 5 months ago, he shocked the entire organization and re-signed in Russia. And that's just the way it seems to happen over there. I mean, again, I'm in Montreal right now. I don't know if everybody out there remembers the big story that I wrote in 2017 when Kirill Kaprizov was captaining the World Junior Championships. I mean, how ironic is this? So in Montreal is the World Junior Championships. The Wild fly to Montreal to meet with his agent, who he was 2 agents ago that Kirill fired. And they wanted to meet Kirill Kaprizov. They drafted him in 2015. They never physically met Kirill Kaprizov, never talked to him or anything. Now we're 2 years later, they fly to Montreal to meet with the kid, and Team Russia refused to let the Wild meet with him. So, and again, that was in this city, coincidentally, now when this is going on. So this has always been the concern when you draft Russian players, especially one of the stature that Kaprizov turned into. And again, I don't want to sound alarms and make Wild fans think that they just traded Kevin Fiala and now they're not even going to get Kaprizov back. But I could tell you that the Wild, they're trying to do their due diligence in the background, but I don't think the Wild have a firm grasp of what's going on here right now. And there's nothing the NHL can do. There's nothing the U.S. government can do. I mean, the Flyers have tried to do everything from a U.S. government point of view, but we're talking about a Russian citizen that, they're alleging broke a law back there in Fedotov, who now they're saying Kaprizov did the exact same thing as this kid. So that is the concern right now is there's nothing anybody on this side of the ocean can do to put pressure in this situation. They just almost got to let it play out. And again, I think Bill Guerin and his team is going to work with the NHL to try to get this stuff verified. And I know Paul Theophanis' agent is trying to as well. But I don't think anybody's going to, feel calm until all of a sudden Kaprizov's on that plane coming back to the United States, if it's true what Bill Guerin said and that he's actually not here right now.
And also, as you wrote, the irony here, of course, is it appears that the Kaprizov career track was one in which he almost seemed to bend over backwards to placate and to do exactly what the Russian government, what Putin wanted in terms of where he played, how long he stayed in the mother country, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this Russian source that I quote in the story says that Kaprizov did everything for these people. But the reality is, if they want to forget about it, they're just going to forget about it. If they don't want to let him go, they're going to decide that. But this has been Kirill Kaprizov's entire career. When in 2018, when the Wild were trying to sign him and they thought he was going to sign him with his next agent, all of a sudden, Kirill Kaprizov he just captained the World Junior Championship team. They put him on the World Championship team and didn't play him a single shift. This is their star captain, a guy that scored 9 goals in the World Juniors, was named best forward of the tournament. And here we are 3-4 months later, they put him on the World Championship team and don't even play him. They had him just sit on the bench, didn't play him a shift. What does he do right after the tournament? He re-signs with CSKA Moscow. And this is the pressure that Kaprizov has been under his entire career. It's just been shady thing after shady thing after shady thing. And, here we are again, and it just feels like, I mean, who knows in 2017 if he made a really bad mistake and committed a crime and got this military ID. It almost seems implausible to me because he was still on the rise as this great Russian player. I don't know how he would have thought that a fake military ID would essentially get him out of service. So it just seems implausible to me from that standpoint. And the other reason why it seems implausible is suddenly it's like he's wrapped up in this fraudulent military ID story. But then in the next breath, they're all saying, well, also his exemption from the military expired on June 30th. So it just feels like there's now 2 stories sort of being floated out there, and this is the pressure right now to try to get these guys coming back here. And I just know a lot of GMs are really worried. And I mean, Chuck Fletcher, when we were talking to him about this today, then I got him on the side and talked to him, because he's dealing with the exact same situation with the guy that he thought was going to be their backup goaltender this year and is their goalie of the future. And now this poor guy's in a camp in Siberia. And, we're talking to Chuck about it, and as we're talking about it, his lower lip is quivering because he doesn't even know how to handle this. He's like, right now, we really just don't know even what to do here. And, as he's saying this, I'm just envisioning what Bill Guerin must be thinking, because it's the exact same situation with Kaprizov. And if they don't want to let him go, they're not going to let him go.
Oh, man. And as you say, the government, a lot of people are emailing about the government U.S. government getting involved. This is a very different situation than Brittany Griner, for the reason you laid out. These are Russian citizens we're talking about. Brittany Griner is a U.S. citizen. So it's a little bit apples and oranges. So they don't really apply.
Absolutely. And they have a law there that if you're a man and you're between 18 and 27, that you owe a year of military service. And there's all sorts of exclusions that always happen, and we see it all the time with Russian athletes. I was talking to Brian McClellan, a local guy from Minnesota. That's the Washington Capitals GM, and he says that every time he talks to Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Orlov, who is, by the way, one of Kaprizov's best friends, he assures them that they'll be on that plane. But he says, look, it's even uncertain for me. It's like, I'm assuming that they're going to be back, but I don't know it. And, and that's how everybody feels right now. And so, look, I still, because I'm so Americanized, I still think that, like, all right, is this just a big story about an incredible situation? And in 4 weeks, we're going to see Kaprizov back here training and, Oshkosh camp. Like, I still believe that is truly going to happen. But, I mean, it is, if anybody, there's nobody in the Wild that could tell you for sure that, like, you could get Bill Guerin on tomorrow and he could tell you I talked to him today. We're not talking the panic button. We're trying to gather this, but we're still confident. But look, deep down, there's no way that Bill Guerin knows exactly what's going to happen until he sees Kaprizov in Minnesota, come the first day of training camp. And I don't think the Wild have long said to me that and a lot of teams have said to me with their Russian players, they told them, look, you go back. We can't stop you from going back, but we're not messing around. You're not coming September 15th for training camp. You got to get here way early. So if we have these speed bumps in the road, we could deal with it. Well, this is one giant mountain of a bump right now the Wild are dealing with Kaprizov. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you, Michael. Great stuff as always. We'll be in touch as this plays out.
See ya.
Be good.
Take care.
Russo Radio helping us out.